Welcome to Sharp Insights, Conversations with your Plan Giving Experts, a podcast for development professionals. Whether you're new to the field or looking to enhance your existing program, we will provide practical tips, expert advice, and real-world stories to deepen your understanding of plan giving. If you're committed to securing long-term support for your nonprofit, you've come to the right place.
Welcome to Episode 1. I'm your host, Grant Miller. Alongside a team of fellow writers, graphic artists, and plan giving visionaries, I collaborate with clients to create custom plan giving communications. I also have the great privilege to work with and learn from 3 highly knowledgeable Sharp Group senior consultants. Thanks for joining us today. Our first guest is Julie Shuldner. Hi, Julie. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Grant. Hi, colleagues. Super excited to launch our podcast.
Excellent. We also have senior consultant Kristen Kroon. Kristen, thanks for joining us today.
Happy to be here, Grant. Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Joe Chicky. Hello, Joe. Thanks for being here as well.
Thanks, Grant. Love to share some stories today.
Excellent. We're looking forward to hearing from your experience today. Today, we're going to discuss why plan giving should be your nonprofit's long game. Now, Joe, I'll start with you. Let's start by talking somewhat broadly, do a brief overview about why plan giving is so important for the long-term sustainability of a nonprofit.
Great question, Grant. We continue to talk to our clients about gaining a better insight in terms of what the wonderful opportunities are in the plan giving space. And I think one of the things that they don't truly understand is that people, when we think about people making a gift, we all understand the annual gift. They make that gift every year, and it's really meaningful. And then maybe there's a campaign and there's a special opportunity for them to make another gift. But there's also what we refer to as the ultimate gift. And it's the largest gift that someone has the donated intent to make. And that's what we call the planned gift. So getting them to understand what the opportunities are is so important for their success.
Thanks, Joe.
Joe touched on something as plan giving is a way to further engage your regular donors, your annual donors, your campaign donors. It's another way to engage the loyal donors and draw them closer to your mission. Additionally, the statistics show that bequest income from an established plan giving program is often the most consistent source of income for a nonprofit. So an established plan giving program can create some financial stability for an organization.
Excellent. Thank you. So what are some of the biggest misconceptions that some organizations might have about plan giving? Joe, you mentioned not necessarily anticipating the ultimate gift. What are some others that you could think of?
So I think maybe the other biggest misconception in plan giving is there's this belief by, in particular, many leaders in the nonprofit community that a planned gift happens tomorrow. So it only happens when someone passes away or later in life. One of the really important messages is we're seeing this tremendous wealth transfer now. So part of that is so critical in terms of acquiring great relationships with these donors so that they can make a meaningful gift to you, but not just for tomorrow, but also for today. So one of the common gifts today, as many of us know, is a gift from your IRA, and it's referred to as a qualified charitable distribution. So once an individual turns 70 and a half, they can actually make a gift out of their IRA, and it's a current gift. So it's actually money today. It's not money tomorrow. So the other piece I would share is Russell James, who is very well known in our sphere, I guess I would call it. And Dr. James is a professor at Texas Tech who started doing a lot of research specific to that bequest space. So what he said when he started doing this about 25 years ago is that 80% of Americans give during their lifetime, but less than 10% at death. And what are we doing wrong as a country? We should be better than that. So the big message there is getting to know these people when they're younger so they can make a gift, not only today, but also for tomorrow.
As far as setting up a plan giving program, I do think many organizations get the feeling or sense that it's very expensive and that it's complicated. Starting a plan giving program can be very simple if you start simply, and you don't need to overcomplicate your message.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, Kristen, because I know we talk about that all the time in our training seminars, that you don't need to be an expert to launch a plan giving program, that most of the gifts that donors are interested in are those simple gifts, a bequest or qualified charitable distribution. And we can't shy away from really jumping in with our organization for a plan giving program, because we're, afraid that someone's going to talk about a more complex gift that we just have no knowledge of. That's not as common. And if it does come up, then, you just say, hey, let me find out more about that, and just circle back with them. It shouldn't really prohibit you from having a program.
Absolutely. I guess you could also consult with your experienced sharp consultant in that situation as well, right?
Definitely.
The plan giving game is a long-term game. And I think for a lot of nonprofits starting out, they might be a little discouraged in the beginning because they're not really seeing any results. What are some things to keep in mind when implementing these short-term strategies, but also keeping the faith about plan giving being a long-term game?
Well, Grant, one of the stories that I love to tell is when I first had the opportunity to hear Robert Sharp Sr. speak early in my career. And he said, when people are thinking about who they're going to name in their estate, of course, they think about family first, whether it's a spouse or children or grandchildren, a niece or a nephew. But maybe, just maybe, there is a charity they're so passionate about, they would include them in their charitable plans. And that's the world we're in. So it's amazing how many people I've worked with over the years that have said, I'm leaving my estate to my son, my daughter, and the University of Illinois, because that if I would not be here today without the experience I had working there. So I think that's a huge piece. The other component, we mentioned briefly Dr. Russell James, the other statistic that he's gathered through his research is that if someone names you, of course, as a member of their family and their legacy, and you cultivate and steward that person, they actually give more money every year. Their annual giving will triple over a 4 or 5 year window. Their special gifts, those gifts for your campaign, will be twice as large. And here's the other piece. That ultimate gift, that legacy gift, could be 2 or 3 times the amount because you become a more important charity. So all of those are really meaningful, and leadership needs to understand what these opportunities are. This perception that it's just a gift later in life and doesn't help their current giving is simply not true. And the data has borne that out over the last 35 or 40 years. So engage these people and move forward with them. It's such an opportunity.
I would add that as far as a short-term strategy you're hoping will help you reach long-term goals, educating your board is critical. Most board members have a term of perhaps 3 to 5 years. So this investment that they are making, they will not see the return until they have long left the board. So it's critical that your board understands the investment and that they understand that they will not see the return during their term. This also means, however, that you will need to regularly inform your board. Just because a board approves a plan giving program, recognize that people on that board are going to roll off. So it's a continual education effort, not just with your donors, but also internally with your board.
Definitely. Another internal strategy is just having a really good CRM. We're seeing so much turnover of development staff in general at all levels, and your stewardship efforts will definitely be undermined if you're not employing really, really good record keeping. So have a great CRM, make sure everybody understands how to use it. A lot of them have mobile capacity, so you meet with a donor and you take your notes immediately after your meeting. It's so important for future development staff to understand the conversations that you've had with donors so that you don't lose momentum in your stewardship strategies.
Excellent. Why do you think in plan giving departments there is such a high turnover of development officers?
In development as a whole, we see lots of turnover. And part of it, I think, is the world we live in. We have a lot of younger people coming into the field now who want to continue to be successful, and they're ambitious. One thing unique about the plan development space is that if you get involved, if you start your career in a nonprofit, it's not just for the money. It's also because you feel like you're making a difference in the world. And those are the kind of people that fit in this space well. It becomes challenging for them to move forward sometimes, so they have to change to other nonprofits so they can advance their career. But the one thing we have definitely seen is if you're going to be successful in the plan giving space, it's about long-term relationships, and you need your staff to stay on board for a number of years before you really see the success.
That's really interesting. There's an account that I follow on Instagram of this gentleman who gives advice on job interviews and how to make your resume. And I saw him post yesterday that if you work at a job for more than 5 years, it will reflect negatively to an employer, which I thought was really interesting and probably won't work in the world of plan giving. I believe outside of bagging groceries in the 60s, my father had 2 jobs over the course of 40 or 50 years. So I guess times they are a-changing, as they say.
Yeah, you don't see that anymore. I think one of the other issues is, and I'm just recalling when I worked on the front line as in development, that it seemed to be you just took on so many additional responsibilities that if they couldn't figure out which department should handle a certain task, throw it on development. They're used to juggling a lot of balls in the air and getting things done. And so I think sometimes people become so overwhelmed by the many, many responsibilities they have, they feel like they're not being effective. And sometimes it's just easier to find a new job rather than try to figure out how to become more efficient in your current position.
So would you say one common mistake that a lot of nonprofit organizations starting out would be the delegation of responsibilities and efficiency there? And maybe if a nonprofit was starting their long-term plans for their plan giving program, that might be something they would consider.
Yeah, I think they definitely need to have a conversation with senior leadership and explain that they have to be focused on raising money, and their supervisor has to understand what that focus is going to require. And it's not taking on responsibilities that are not, falling into the category of fundraising.
I would add, with a development employee, having reasonable and actionable matrix that count how many visits does a person make is far more important to how much money they've raised in a year. And that's particularly difficult for somebody new in the field. I know that I struggled with this when I first started in plan giving. I felt like I wasn't doing anything because the money wasn't coming in the door. And I was fortunate to have a very wise president of my foundation. And he explained to me, he was from the country, and he said, my job was to stir up a cloud of dust and that eventually some of the dust would settle. And that really shifted my mindset. So I think it's critical that the board, the head of the organization, and the coworkers understand what the role of a development person in plan giving is.
Hey, Grant, I would just add, I think the other thing that's really important in that metric space, sometimes we see in particular with some of the larger universities and larger charities, well, that's my donor. There has to be a team approach. You have to work together. We talk often in our seminars about multiple people going on calls as you build relationships, how important listening skills are. And if there are 2 people there, obviously one person is talking, you're not going to do as good a job as listening. So it's such a critical soft skill in our business in building these long-term relationships that I think they need to understand. And I'll also add, I guess, that there are many opportunities to have success with these people. And maybe I've been fortunate in that early in my career, I started in the investment business. And the thing that I learned is the people who had been successful in life and wanted to give back are just a joy to work with. So when you can identify those people that had been successful and are passionate about a cause, then it's a wonderful field. It's a wonderful job. May take a little time to meet some of those people and get to know some of those people. But as you do, you'll learn how much joy there is in this part of the career. And it really is meaningful.
That's one of my favorite parts, Joe, about our in-person seminars is meeting everybody and hearing from them what their responsibilities are, what their metrics are, how many staff they have, how their responsibilities are shared. And it's just interesting, I think, for us as consultants, but also interesting for the other attendees to share what works best, what doesn't work. And that's why I always encourage clients and prospective clients to attend our in-person seminars, because you're not only learning what we have to share, but then also what the other attendees have to share. And it's just really vital, if you can swing it, to try and come in person.
No, that's a great point. We all continue to learn from our attendees. It's a great learning experience for us as well as the attendees, and to hear their stories and some of their challenges and what opportunities might be in front of them that they just haven't pursued yet. So yeah, I agree, the in-person work is much more meaningful and an opportunity to learn. And we also do a lot of coaching and mentoring for our clients now. So we have regular communication with them, whether it's monthly or quarterly, and help them. My favorite part of the job, I think, right now is helping people close some of these, fun, exciting, significant gifts. And whether it's a gift of a non-cash asset, or whether it's somebody who's selling a business and they can transfer closely held securities to a charitable remainder unit trust. I mean, there's some really fun ways that people can make gifts. And that's what gets exciting, when we can work with the donor in that real donor-centric way to make sure the donor gets just as much benefit from the gift and has the impact with the organization that matters to them and to the charity.
Thank you. Those sounds like the seminars sound like an excellent environment to not just learn from the professional experience of the three of you, but also just have people learn from each other and, solve problems together. And I think oftentimes, like, sharing our personal stories are some of the best ways for people to learn things. And I know that the donor stories that we contribute to our newsletters and to clients' websites and things like that are very effective, I guess, inspiring others to give. But I wanted to circle back on something. Kristen, your friend from the country said kicking up dust, and not to dampen the metaphor, but some might say casting a wide net or something like that. But I'm just curious, when casting these nets and thinking about this long-term strategies and this long-term game of getting what Joe called the ultimate gift, how do you go about stewarding potential donors for the long term, and what does that look like?
That's an excellent question, Grant, because as we all know, people are living longer, and the data shows that most make their final will, which is the will that really matters, within 3 years of passing away. And that creates some real struggles for planned giving officers. If you think it through, as people age, as they get substantially older, they typically move. They may go to an assisted living facility or go move with one of their family members. So frankly, just keeping in touch with them becomes more and more difficult. It's critical that you continue to have a personal relationship with them. Imagine that much of their social circle is falling away at the same time. So you have an opportunity to create a bond with them long term. Additionally, there's a lot of really creative online marketing materials and ways to discuss planned giving options. But as people age, printed material is much, much more effective. They will hold on to it. They make their decisions based on printed materials, not based on something on the computer. And if you can present things that are reasonable, readable, and actionable for them on a regular basis, you'll have greater success.
I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's really about that consistent messaging and taking a look at your database and segmenting it based on who your audience is. So you could segment by age, you could segment by consistency of giving, but it's important to target the different audience with the message that will resonate best with them. And then I think you'll see your greatest success if you really put the time into it and deliver it on different platforms. Meet them where they are. Older adults really find themselves engaged with that printed messaging. But at the same time, we can have a multi-channel marketing campaign using our social media, using e-blasts, in-person visits, phone calls. There's so many different ways to communicate your mission and allowing people to invest in that.
So, Grant, I'd love to share a story talking about the importance of print material. One of my clients, actually, we featured a story on a gift of real estate. And this is a small university town. One of the other things that's important that we do in all our publications is have pictures of those people that work for the institution that these donors will work with. So one afternoon, there was a local farmer who showed up in their development office in his overalls and said, hey, and he carried in his print newsletter and said, hey, I want to talk to one of these three people. He said, sure, we'll set up a meeting. And, as it turns out, he had a family farm and he and his wife didn't have any children and they were big fans of the university. So it turned out to be a significant gift of a farm. And he had never made a gift to the institution prior to that time period. So it just illustrates how, as we talked about, they get this physical piece in their hands, and that's what becomes meaningful for them. And they understand that and feel comfortable with that.
I love that. So he just walked into the office with the actual physical copy of the newsletter and pointed to a person's picture and said, I want to talk to this person. That's great.
Absolutely.
Also, Julie and I have a client, the American Diabetes Association, and we were talking with the director there, and she had mentioned they're at the forefront of a lot of, obviously a lot of research on planned giving, and they recently sent out a very large survey asking people about how they liked to receive information from the American Diabetes Association, and they overwhelmingly said they wanted print publications. And then last time we were talking, she mentioned that they had been doing some research, and she found that even younger groups of people are leaning more towards print publications, which I found really interesting.
Grant, you raise a good point, because if you think about this, the printed materials are educating donors about something that they will be doing in their future. They're not getting that printed material today, and it happens to be the same day that they're going to visit with their accountant or their attorney. And so they will put it in the folder with the information that they're taking to their accountant or their attorney. Now, if this was something they'd seen on the website, they may have to print it out and then take it. It just makes things a little bit more complex. So you want to give them something to take to their advisor. And then in that way, you're also helping the advisor because you're giving them the actionable information, and it's helping the advisor serve their client better as well.
Great, thank you. And just following up on something that Joe was mentioning earlier about, I believe you said that most people create their final will in the last 3 years of their life. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well, I'm in my early 40s, and my wife made me create a will. And so I have one as well. And is there a difference between the will that I create when I'm 40 and the will that someone creates towards the end of their life? And, what is the significant difference there? And why can't an organization get excited about me promising to leave something in my estate plans to that organization?
That's an excellent question, Grant. Most people make their first will when they have a child. And the reason for that is a will not only distributes financial assets, but it also provides the opportunity to name a caregiver for any minor children. You, Grant, will probably live for another 50 years, hopefully more than that. And in that 50 years, your passions will develop, your passions will change. Some organizations that are very important to you right now, for example, maybe your child's school is a huge part of your lifestyle right now. And if you were to give in your will right now, it may be to your child's school. But 50 years on, a number of organizations become into your life and you may become more passionate about it. Additionally, circumstances change. Your financial circumstances may change. Your relationship circumstances may change. And all of those factor into how one structures their estate plan. Additionally, tax laws change on a regular basis, so that may require some changing. So people are adjusting their wills on a pretty regular basis if they're being thoughtful. And that's why it's so critical. If somebody names you in your organization in their will when they're 40, that is terrific. That tells you they really care about you, but that also tells you the burden is on you as a nonprofit now to continue to develop the relationship with that donor.
Well, let me just add real quick too. The other piece here is it takes time to acquire and accumulate wealth. So before someone can leave you a lot of money, they have to actually earn and generate a lot of that money, right? And that just doesn't happen for most people in their 30s and 40s. It's typically somebody who's 70 or 80 or, there's significant money through bequests given every year from people 90 and older, right? Again, it's the average age of a mature bequest in our country, in particular in that university, large charity space is late 80s. So again, that last will is being done when they're in their mid 80s. So you have to be in a good position. But I've worked with a lot of donors over the years in their 60s and 70s who still have children and maybe even grandchildren that they're concerned about and making sure they're taken care of. But maybe by the time they're 85, the kids and grandkids are doing really well. They don't need the money anymore. And that 401k or that IRA or that 403b over 30, 40, 50 years can really add up, as we've seen, to a significant amount. And then they're in this unique space. And then just think about the value of real estate. People who bought homes that were probably $100,000 40, 50 years ago. Some of those homes are $500,000 or even $1 million in parts of the country now. That adds to one other element that's critically important. Obviously, if you can identify somebody who doesn't have children, and maybe never been married, they can obviously accumulate more wealth and can be a wonderful donor. Data would suggest, I believe this is Russell James as well, but 50% of individuals who never marry and never have children leave money to charity in their estate versus, 10 to 15% for people who have family and have heirs.
That just goes back to our conversation about data segmentation and about strategy, that a bequest is the most common type of gift and anybody can make it. Anyone can make a bequest. It's not income related. And so if you are a smaller program or a program that's just launching, it's really important to focus on bequest giving and marketing that opportunity to all of your donors, regardless of their net worth.
It's always fascinating to me too to see the people that leave significant bequest gifts that may have either not had the ability or not been interested in that charity until later in life. Kristen mentioned this. Maybe we see this in the healthcare space a little bit more often. Someone who has open heart surgery or life-saving disease, right? And the physician turns their life around, so they become a real grateful patient. And that's somebody they want to give a lot of money to. We see that often in the healthcare. I've worked for a couple of hospitals. It's always interesting to see that space. But I know one of the other stories I love to share, I've worked with an independent high school, and they had a donor who they knew was pretty successful. And actually, he owned a bunch of car dealerships around the community and around the state. And they did cultivate and steward him well. He made some small gifts during his lifetime. But they had asked him on several capital campaigns if he'd make a gift. And he said, no, I'm going to leave everything to you in my estate. I might need it one day. But when he passed away, he was worth $50 million. And he left, as it turned out, half of that came to the high school. And he said, I have tremendous respect for the colleges and the universities that I attended, but this independent high school truly made me the person I am today. And he knew it would be a transformational gift for this high school. So that passion, I think it's so important still for us to focus on identifying those people who are passionate about our organization and our cause. And we always have to lead with that message before we get into conversations about the smart ways that they can make the gift.
Excellent. We'll definitely have to dig into that more next time. I wanted to go back to one thing that Kristen said, and you mentioned, just because I'm thinking about my will that I have, and you mentioned that certain things like tax changes and financial changes in status require one to maybe change their will. And I just kind of thought that my will was something that I would put in a drawer and deal with it later. And you mentioned that it's something that we'd have to update, relatively often. How often would you recommend that people review their will and make potential updates?
I would suggest, honestly, it sounds maybe a little silly, but to calendar a meeting with your spouse every 3 years to sit down, read over your will, and see if it continues to meet your needs. If you review it, you may not need to make any changes. Honestly, my husband and I, we made our will when our children We're born, and 25 years later, our will still suits our needs. So we have not made any changes in 25 years. But if we have a health experience that changes our perspective, or change in family relationships, change in financial situation, we absolutely would adjust our will.
And so this is a message that you believe that nonprofit organizations should continue to communicate with their potential donors, right?
Absolutely. A lot of planned giving is not, please give to us. It's helping the donors get to the point where they are comfortable with the vehicles that they can use to share their resources with you. If you can be a partner with them, also by helping their advisors, you will see far more success.
Sorry, Grant. I was just going to say, sometimes it's even as basic as educating your donors about estate planning. I think, wasn't it 40%? I think I just read individuals, only 40% have a will or a trust. And so just educating them about the benefits of having a say in who receives their property, family members, charity. So it's so important by planting that seed as to the importance of having a plan. Perhaps they will include your organization in it.
Excellent. Well, our time is waning here, but I wanted to end our episode today with one question for each of you, and just drawing from your personal expertise. Is there any advice that you would give for a plan giving officer who's just starting their career?
I'm happy to start with that. I would say, and this is true for almost any career, is finding a mentor. And with planned giving and development, you may want to find more than one mentor. You may need to find one within your organization or another fundraiser, somebody who's been working in planned giving or development for a long while, who can guide you. But I would also encourage you to build a relationship with some of your organization's best donors. They can help you with the soft skills. They can help you understand the financial decision-making that's tied to someone's passion, and they can help you develop your why and a way to communicate with potential donors.
Well, I would say that that's all great insight, and that's so true, Kristen. One of the things I share with new plan giving people is what I call the 3 Ps to success. So number one, passion. It's so important that you talk about your passion for your charity and the impact it's having every day to make our world better. Number 2, you have to be persistent. You have to be persistent in finding a way to get in front of the right people. So reaching out to them, talking to them, sharing your ideas, sharing your passion, because it takes time in our business. And you have to share this whole concept of finding the right people and talking to them over a window of time. And then thirdly is patience. One of my favorite stories at the University of Illinois is the first donor that I met with. He was an amazing guy who had built bridges all over the world and had moved from New York to Chicago because he was a huge Chicago Cubs fan. He bought a condo overlooking Wrigley Field. That's how he wanted to spend his final years. My call with him was the first donor I'd ever met with, and I didn't finalize his planned gift until about 3 weeks before I left the organization, which was almost 8 years. So it takes a lot of patience for you to see the success of this kind of program. And that's just the nature of our business.
That's great advice, Joe. I would just add that soft skills are so important. And I would say that being a good listener really rises to the top of the list. I remember being at a conference, and Brian Klontz was one of the speakers, and he said, you need to live by the 4 S's. So 3 stories and then shut up. So I'll just rephrase that. Just be quiet. So sometimes we just need to listen and observe the body language of the person you're speaking with. Listen to what they're saying, and, just 80% of the time they should be talking, 20% of the time you should be talking. And I think that will be more effective in cultivating your relationship with them and building that relationship that's based on trust and really making their dream come true of making a difference in your organization.
Well, I see us covering this topic for an entire episode sometime in the future, and I look forward to that. Joe Chicky, Kristen Kroon, Julie Shuldner, thanks for demystifying some of the seemingly complex world of plan giving today.
Thanks for listening. We hope today's discussion gave you practical takeaways to grow your plan giving program. To submit questions and topics for future episodes, go to sharpgroup.org or listen to us on your favorite podcast app. If you found this podcast insightful, be sure to like, review, and subscribe. Until then, stay sharp.